Welcome to the Sunday School Teacher Luncheon. It just sounds more fancy when you say it that way. It's a lunch. It's fairly informal, but we did want to express our gratitude to you. So, welcome. Now, as I stated in the postcard and the email, I have 4 objectives for today. And I don't want you to realize, oh my goodness, we're number 2, and he's still talking. The second one's going to be the longest, and then they're pretty quick after that. But our 4 objectives that in preparation for this meeting is, first, we do hope to encourage you in your present and ongoing service. So we're grateful for you. We want to properly express that. Also, want to talk about available resources and tools for Sunday school. Third, provide some updates and a view to what 2020 looks like for Sunday school. And then fourth, receive some feedback from you on how the elders can best serve and help in your service. So our first objective, encourage you in your present and ongoing service. I try to be reasonably conservative. Probably the critique would be I'm too conservative with my praises of people. I don't casually throw out there like, wow, you're doing great. Because most of the time we're not. So, and I want to be charitable, but I also want to be careful because I want my words to carry their intended weight. If I'm always just throwing lavish praises out there, then it's going to diminish when I finally do throw it out there. So I want you to hear it as intended, that I genuinely am proud of you as teachers and as co-laborers in the local church. I don't have to say that. I could have eased on out, but I really am proud of y'all. Y'all work so hard. Y'all have done so well and continue to do well. You make my service and the service of the other elders a joy. And we have full confidence of you fulfilling the high calling of teaching and leading your classes well. We don't meet together and be like, oh, what have they done? What are we going to have to fix? Y'all are caring for the body. And so we're very, very grateful for that. And we want to express our gratitude for that. We don't look at any of you and say, well, maybe they'll get better. We're so grateful. So please hear that. We know y'all work hard day in, day out, week in, week out. So we are very, very, very grateful. And I will always be grateful. The Lord has so generously grown us up together these last several years. Some of you probably have more war stories about my leadership than others, but the Lord's grown us up, and so I'm very, very grateful for that. And I want you to hear that and know that. And also, do y'all remember, some of you, probably about 5-6 years ago, we had our first teacher training that I was leading over here. It was a 4-week class. And I came in like gangbusters. I basically said, here's the standard to teach here. This is what you have to do. And if you can't meet that standard, it's perfectly fine. We'll find something else for you to do. But if you don't want to meet that standard, then you're probably not going to be teaching here. And it wasn't to be hard or harsh. It was that we're teaching the scriptures. We're leading God's people. We're caring for Christ's church. And if you look around, these are the folks that you've maintained that standard. You've met that standard. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. I know that was a high call, but you answered it. And I know it was a little bit jarring for some at the time to hear that, well, maybe you shouldn't teach, or maybe there's something else you would do. But again, you're the ones that have persevered and you've labored well. So again, I want to acknowledge that. I do remember that. And I do remember your faithfulness. And I've watched you come along and grow and respond so well. So thank you for that. Also, you and your family should be proud of your service to this local church. The pastors, we get recognized fairly consistently in a variety of ways, but you should be proud of your service. Teaching is no small deal. This is how we feed the sheep. We can't do all the stuff that you're doing, and so we're very, very grateful for that. This is baseline, ground level discipleship. And so you should be proud of your work, and also your families should be, because families, and that's part of the reason I wanted families in here, is that our families make us better teachers. And we know that y'all sacrifice. We know that when there's an expectation to teach at this level, to study and prepare, that means something's giving somewhere, right? It means time away from doing other things. That means less discretionary time, less recreational time. And so I want to recognize that and say thank you to the families as well, because when we expect things of teachers, we're also expecting it of your families as well. So we're grateful for that. And also because I don't publicly, aggressively, generously offer enough praise, there's one member among our families that's I think probably sacrificed more in terms of the discipleship program over the last several years than arguably anybody else, because everything I've written, all those pages, so this last one was 23 pages or whatever, at some point in time that passed through Denise's hands. It got grammatically proofed, and if you read it and you found something, it's because she was just wore out. She finally just ran out of commas to add, and finally just gave up on my Pauline sentences. And if you find a sentence that's 4 or 5 lines long, that was me, and she really did try. But and also providing readability, because if you've worked on something for hours and hours and hours, you hear yourself, and it's hard not to hear yourself. And so she helps with the readability and overall clarity. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that and recognize that she's done a lot of hard work. There were also many nights that it was a fairly consistent pattern in our home for, I'd say, probably years, that I'd finish a study guide anywhere between 12 to 15 pages about anywhere between 2 and 4 in the morning on Sunday morning. And I would be really tired. And I would give myself to it until I finally just ran out of time. And that wasn't the end of it, though. And then I would go wake Denise up. And it wasn't gentle. It's usually like, I've got to go. I've got to take a shower, and you've got to read this right now. And she would. She would read it and look over it, proof it, and then I'd run up here and print it. And that's nothing like, wow, look at that. You've done something special. Denise was sacrificially serving y'all as well. So I want to make sure I recognize that. The Lord gave me the grace of endurance in those times, but also the grace of a wonderful helpmate. So I want to make sure I recognize my family. Thankfully, that pattern also did stop with 1 Peter, though. You noticed that we get weeks and months at a time now. And so I want to make sure I recognize Ron. I know he's not here, but I get that to him usually very, very tight to the deadline. And then he does something he makes it look good. And he provides it for you so generously. Obviously, we try to take care of him, but he's very, very faithful, very, very generous. And so I want to recognize that as well. So the sacrifices of our families, my family, Ron, others, we see that. The church body doesn't always see that. They see us teaching for 30, 45 minutes. But I want to recognize again that 30, 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes is your family sacrificing hours and days. Your family's missing out on things and being tired. So I want to make sure we recognize that and express our gratitude. I want to encourage you to press on. And I pray that you will continue to press on in faithfulness in the days ahead. The thing about Sunday school teaching is that Sundays come every week. There's no bye week. I have tried to build in corporate Sunday schools for the benefit of the larger church, but I also try to do it for y'all as well. Because every week. And I know, and it's kind of like police and firefighters. There's a soft antagonism there. Like the fact that everybody's like, wow, they ran a whole race in their turnout gear. Police officers chase bad guys in their gear all the time. What's the big deal? Now, music people. I've heard musicians say things like, well, the reason I write music is because people forget a sermon, they forget Sunday school lessons, but they'll always remember my song. But if we taught the same thing every week, they'd remember it, wouldn't they? But what is your challenge? Your challenge is really hard. Every single week you have to prepare. Every single week you have to labor in the scriptures. Every single week you have to cast yourself before the Lord, pray that you will understand, apply it to your life, and then be able to articulate to others. That's a lot of work. So I want to recognize that and express my thanks to you for that. There was a time when I had to do that with working a normal job or regular job, and I know that's hard. That's really hard. It still has its challenges now for sure, but I recognize that some of you, you're very, 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 very busy. So I'm grateful for that. And I hope that, again, you'll continue to persevere and show faithfulness in the days ahead in those ways. Also, so that's our first objective. I wanted just to make sure that you remember that. And in terms of the last thing, I want you to also remember we talk about 1 Peter and we talk about reward and we talk about an eschatological perspective. I hope that you press on in such a way that you're looking to the Lord's reward for both you and your family. Sacrificial faithfulness to the Lord who is generous in his reward. We try to be kind, we try to recognize, we try to encourage, but the Lord will reward. The Lord will reward. There's going to be a day in which this is all said and done. And the Lord's going to express His gratitude to you for being faithful with His words expressed to His people, for caring for His people, for shepherding His people, for discipling them and investing in lives. So be encouraged in that as well, especially when the day in and day out cycle continues. So our second objective, talk about available resources for Sunday school. And I know most of you are very, you have good resources that you have available to you, that you go to. I just want to highlight a few. Have any of you tried or used the Step Bible yet, stepbible.org? I've just highlighted it once or twice before, but never all that heavily. It's a free, very easy to use word study, just powerhouse. I use this website tool almost every single day until the church very, very generously upgraded me to a real Logos account. I was doing a free one where you just hodgepodge stuff together, and it basically does this kind of stuff, so I've stepped away from it. But it's a really, really valuable tool, and it's free, so I want to make sure you're aware of that. Before I had a more robust tool, this is what I used all the time up until the last several months. Another one, I know a lot of y'all use bluebible.org. How many of y'all use that? So, again, you're familiar with it. A very, very valuable tool. Something I wanted to highlight is that back in March, did y'all know that they partnered with Sermon Audio? So back in March, they partnered with Sermon Audio. So whatever your text you're working on, they'll help you find a message on that text. Now that's not oh good, I'll just teach their message. It's oh good, now I can hear somebody that's wrestled and worked through the text. It's basically like an audio commentary, if you will. So bluebible.org, they've partnered with Sermon Audio. So just another helpful free tool that hopefully will be helpful to you. Another free resource. How many of you have ever used this one before? Our library. Our library. I think about, Rick's been gone for about a year and a half now, I guess.
2 years.
2 years? Wow, okay, 2 years. And if you look in the library on their desk, underneath the glass, they have a picture of the Blasi family. I thought, they remember them. And then I think about when I set my card down, which I don't have like a library card, but the little card that you're supposed to punch, I'm always in there punching it by myself. If you pick up the 1 Peter one, or if you pick up random commentaries, if you pick up other ones, you'll see David. It's like, oh, they'll remember me. It's a good resource. It's a good resource. Avail yourself of it. We've tried to put more and more stuff in there over the years, things I'll highlight, Bible knowledge commentary, various commentaries. One of the ones I'd like to add before the end of the year are some cultural commentaries. I know Adam's got some in his office, the InterVarsity Press. There's one for the Old Testament, one for the New Testament. Just really helpful resources on background and cultural commentary. We're 2,000 years apart from the oldest part of the Scripture, or from the latest part of the Scriptures. So there's a lot of cultural elements that are helpful that I'm looking to add that to the library. But use our library. Now, I don't know if you may or may not remember this. Back when we were going through Psalms, how many of you were survivors all the way back from when we were going through the Psalms? So yeah, some of you're the remnant. You're hanging in there. Well, when we were going through the Psalms, somebody asked me, I want to be able to study these things well. I want to be able to go to the Scriptures like you're telling us to, and be able to highlight these things and work through these things in a way that's effective. And so I basically provided a 10-step condensed version of what I've told y'all for everybody. And so I'd like to remind you of some of these things. So here we have, this is just common basic things, but we need to be reminded not to be leaning on things so much that we're getting away from the text. So I want to highlight resources and have you rush to resources and not rush and root yourself in the text. So the first step, read and this is all from the Psalms. It's transferably applicable. Read the respective Psalm every day, but don't just read it to complete a task. Read it slowly and deliberately. We're students of the Scriptures. If we're teaching a text, we don't need just to read it to be like, okay, that's what I'll talk about. Or I read it once, now I'll just kind of figure out the pieces. You need to be marinated in it. You need to be thinking about it. It's almost like a passive memorization. Anytime I'm in a book, it almost becomes a passive memorization. I can flip, I can find it, I can mentally know where things are because you've invested in it. You've heard it. Audio Bibles are free and readily available. Listen to it over and over and over again. It's a valuable resource. Read the respective psalm aloud every day. Hear the words as you speak them aloud. You look at in Romans 10 today, 9 through 13, I'm still fascinated by the fact that there's a verbal component to our Lord's work in our hearts, right? The Lord, what did he do when he created? He did what? Spoke. As image bearers, what do? We are language people, right? We have his written word. These things, I think, should impact us. And I think one of the things that's a valuable thing to do is to hear the scriptures. Either listen to them or read them aloud. Let them be seasoned into your mind and life. For general study, I suggest keep a notebook handy during this time and write out the psalm every day if you're able to, with the obvious exceptions with the lengthier Psalms 119. And we talked about this in teacher training when there's certain things that are accomplished in the mind when you're writing a text out. That's a common discipline I do is when I'm going through a text, I want to write it out. Now, we're doing surveys of the whole books. I don't write the whole books out. I can't do it. I don't have the skill set or the strength or the stamina. But you're engaging the mind differently. So how many of y'all take notes during the services? You don't have to. I'm just wondering. Now, what happens to those notes? A lot of times we don't go back all the time, but that discipline of writing and engaging soaks it in better. That's been proven time and again. And so what am I encouraging? I'm encouraging seeing as you read, verbally declaring it as you read, and writing it. You're engaging those different expressions with the language of the scriptures. Fourth, take time to meditate on the respective psalm. Give it time to resonate in your heart and mind. Think about the words, the emotions, the thoughts, the truths, the principles expressed. Try to identify patterns, themes, and the various literary parallelism structures. We're going to come back to this, but I think that this gets lost. And part of it is we're so busy. And part of it is Sunday does come so fast. But if you can find time to meditate, to let it soak into your soul, that's so, so, so important. You can rush and you can come to a conclusion, and you'll probably be right most of the time. Especially if when you go to your resource and nobody disagrees with you. It's very disconcerting when I spend about 90% of my time doing my own work, and then I go to commentators, and then the first one disagrees with you, you're like, whatever. And then the fourth one, when they disagree with you, now you know you might have a problem. But that being said, there's something lost to, you don't want to lose this. You don't want to rush through things or rush to commentators. Take the time to meditate. Fifth, when meditating on the Psalms, see how much you can memorize over the course of the week. And I'm a big fan of, and this is, I'm actually the guy in Awana. I'm a hard person in a lot of ways in terms of I want it this way. But I'm a soft one in Awana. Because if there's a word that they just, but it's communicating the exact same thing, I don't really stress about it. And that's how I treat memorization, is if you can communicate the idea and the principle and the truth of it. And it's not that you have to formally memorize, but can you draw it up? Can you draw back from 1 Peter 9 through 13? Start remembering the words and the language. Because when you do that, what happens is it shows up in your praying and your thinking, and it impacts your teaching. 6. Seek to discern how the psalm or the scriptures should influence your praying. What does it teach you about God, man, life, etc.? Use as much of the psalm or the scriptures as you can in your time of prayer. We don't just, you don't read things from the scriptures just so that they can fascinate your mind or that you can have something to talk about. Do they impact your praying? We don't have to have special lessons on praying so much as we just need to know and understand the text. Because when you watch the people in the scriptures pray, what are they usually praying? They're praying back the scriptures. And it may not be the scriptures exactly, but they're communicating principles and precepts that you could find time and time and time again. Let it impact your praying. And let it impact your praying when you're teaching as well, when your class hears you pray, let them hear how what you're saying in the class is impacting how you're praying. Seek to discern how you can put the psalm to song. Obviously, that's more applicable with the Psalms. If you can do it with 1 Peter, then you're probably in the category of Michael Card. But, just be exposed and engrossed in the truths that are there. 8, in your notebook, record your thoughts and questions as you're reading and meditating on the respective psalm that week. What we talked about in teacher training is interrogating the text. I never come to text and like, oh, that's interesting. 3 observations. I want to ask everything I can think of it. I want to ask, so if that's the high chair there in front of me, if that was a text, I want to ask, how tall is it? Does that oblong structure at the bottom, does it give it more stability? Why is it that way? Did someone make it that color? Is it the natural color? There's a sticker on the back. What does that sticker say? Should it have bbeen left there? The brown on the straps, is that to complement it, or is it because the parents can see it easier when they're strapping their kids in? Is it just for parents, or who is supposed to? You can start thinking of like, what do I ask? What can I learn? Because what you're doing is you're pressing yourself to refined and greater understanding of a simple thing. You could just walk up and be like, yeah, that's a high chair. But boy, you're missing so much when you're not pressing it. So press, make observations, interrogate the text. 9, at the end of the week, when you have disciplined yourself to exercise all these steps, write out your working understanding of the psalm, which is basically for us, what's that? It's your lesson plan or whatever you do. When you finally have gotten your hands around it, you put it together. And then finally, then and only then do you go to your resources. This is my philosophy. I know people have different philosophies, but I don't want to run to a commentary to get my understanding of a text until I've labored in the text myself. That's not to say that I'm as biblically literate or as brilliant as most commentators. I know I'm not. But what I want to come to a commentator and say is, yes, I saw that. Or, wow, I didn't see that, but I understand where they're coming from, and it refines my thinking further because I've developed a base for it. What frustrates me is those times when I come to a commentator, and Denise will experience this sometimes, I get a little angry about it. I'm like, if I was better in my Greek, I would have seen that. And that makes me so frustrated that he saw that and I didn't. Because that's when I want to have the relationship with the text. I don't want it just to be like somebody feeding me. That's for children. Children get fed. Adults, we labor, and then we fix our plates and then we eat. And so that's something just to remind you of some things that we've provided before by way of teacher resources and training. Also, some supplemental counsel and reflections I'd like to provide for you. Just some, again, additional kind of proverbial disconnected thoughts, but I think they're helpful. When spending so much time in small sections of a book, be careful not to lose your bearings. And I'm speaking to myself here. Remember, there's continuity to the book and within the larger canon of the scriptures. This happens in 1 Peter. When you have in 1 Peter, you will suffer, you are suffering, you might suffer. If you lock in and you forget those other things, then when you get to you might suffer, you forget that he said you will suffer or you have suffered. And you'll forget to wrestle with that. You see what we're saying? When we're so refined in our 2 to 3 or 2 to 6 verses at a time, don't lose sight of the larger book. That's why you need to be reading and listening to the whole book as much as possible. That's something I fall into. I catch myself because I'm a detail guy. I love the details, but don't lose sight of the larger story or narrative. We make cross-references. I don't know if you notice in the study guides, I don't do this to fill up pages. I read commentators and they'll make like 3 to 15 references, bam, 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 right in the middle of a narrative, paragraph. You know how many of those I look up? It really just depends on how much I think that's going to help me. I don't look them all up, not usually. In the study guide, that's exactly why I put the whole verse there. Because if I put it there, it's because I want you to see it and connect it. I do that for the general populace. Now for y'all, this is what I would encourage you to do. Anytime you have a cross-reference, read the whole chapter. Because you might just find that you are saying something or that you're quoting something that has nothing to do with the original context. And I know it could be like, well, that kind of happens in the scriptures sometime. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I know there are times when we're puzzled by how did they make that connection, but there's actually a friend of mine, well, casual friend, more of a friend. He's working on his doctorate in a hermeneutical discipline in terms of his persuasion, and I think he's right, that everywhere the New Testament quotes the Old Testament, it is the original authorial intent, not just a principle that they're drawing out every single time. So when Isaiah gets quoted, he would say when he reads it over here, that's exactly what I meant. It's not just, oh, well, the cultural and the progressive revelation, he would say, because I was inspired by the Holy Spirit. That's exactly what I meant. And if that's even potentially true, we've got to know the context. So read the whole chapter. That's always a good discipline. When there are strong differences on positions, do your best to remain or stay in the center of biblical tension. And even this requires wisdom. This is not a call to always be seeking the middle ground. I'm not saying that. And by center of biblical tension, so the easiest is we have to acknowledge that man has a will, the capacity to choose, right? We gave you 3 choices. That wasn't to make a point, but we could make a point of it, right? Nobody compelled you to get one chili or the other. Your diet might have, but we didn't, right? So we know that, but we also know that in God's sovereign plan, He had me pick menu items. He had Denise prepare things. He had in whatever available order. And you picked what you picked what the sovereign God of the universe, He knew you were going to pick. Now, staying in the center of tension is, there's that freedom and then there's the sovereignty. So we understand tension, right? Stay in tension. Staying in the center of biblical tension is not saying, well, they say this and they say this, so we'll just compromise. No. That's compromise. That's not maintaining tension. So stay in the middle of tension as much as possible. And that's not, it doesn't mean that we always have a compromise, but there's going to be positions. So we see that in 1 Peter. We ran into it in terms of, how do you understand what happened with Jesus preaching to the spirits? There's certain things that I have a hard time resolving. And there's things here I could just lop over to and give up, or there's things over here I can lop over, but I'm willing to stay in that tension because I think that's the best way to articulate the text. Don't give up too soon. Keep a measure of tension. Be kind to one another. And I'm saying that with complete sincerity, especially to us as teachers. Because, what do they call it when the president, especially the president in office now, when he really wants to get a message across, they call it the bully what? Pulpit. It's because when you have the floor, you can say whatever you want. And you can really tear people down. That's not our place as teachers. It's not our place to assault differing positions or differing conclusions. So be kind to one another, especially those who are not in the room to defend themselves. If somebody holds a different theological conclusion, the likelihood of them laboring in the scriptures and loving the Lord is probably higher than you realize. Be willing to defer in love to the point where, not that you're saying they're correct, but you're not beating them down. I'm so grateful that when I was in Bible college, I had a weird group of men around me. On my hall, at one point in time, we had a guy that was Dutch Reformed and a guy that was as charismatic gets. He had a painting of Jesus on a piece of plywood that somebody saw in a dream and gave to him. That's pretty out there. But that man, I walked with him and I watched him and I prayed with him, and I know he loves the Lord. I'm not going to be like those idiots with those paintings. What I'm going to say is, boy, he's missing it. And it makes me so sad, but he's a good man. And he does love our Lord. He needs a lot of refinement. But be careful that we're not tearing people down. It's very easy to stand up here and just be like, people that do that, they're idiots. No, some of them are. Okay? There are idiots out there, and that's okay to recognize. But some of them really love the Lord, and the people that taught them, who labored and invested in their life, didn't do a very good job. So be gracious. Be gracious. And be gracious within our fellowships. There's going to be people that sit in your classes that they've struggled with the scriptures, and they're differing with you, and they're wrestling with it. And what you're saying is hard for them to to apprehend. They may agree with you in a week or two after they've wrestled more. So be gracious and be gentle and recognize that while we say theology is precious and that we have to esteem it, it is precious, but don't spoil it with pride. It's best adorned with humility. Know yourselves and know your tools. You have more resources and tools available than you could ever effectively avail yourselves of. So choose and choose one that helps strengthen and refine you and learn how to use them well. So I gave you a few examples. You don't need to be on Step Bible, Bible.org, or BlueBible.org, the library, all these books, all at the same time and every week. You just can't do it. Like if you went into my office right now and you said, when's the last time you used that commentary? I don't feel some unique burden like every time I have to open it. We have a range of tools. Find which ones complement your strengths, complement your weaknesses, and then learn how to use them really well. And this is a bit of a frustration of mine. Do learn how to use the tools that have been provided to you. You know, what is it when a plane's taxiing? It's doing what? It's not a trick question. It's rolling, right? It's got wheels. You can drive a plane, right? You can drive it, but planes weren't meant to drive, right? They're meant to fly. Don't use your resources and tools like you're driving everywhere. If they're meant to fly, then learn how to fly them. And you don't have to have 100 different resources, but learn, where am I strong? Where am I weak? Like I said, I'm working on strengthening myself and my efforts with the Greek. You know, that might be just spinning your wheels. Don't waste time on that. Find something where you are strong, where you are complemented, or things that are good with Greek because maybe you don't know it, but it is articulated in a way that's helpful to you. So learn your tools, learn how to use them well. Also, you're always a better teacher when you're investing in lives. You know, this is Sunday school, and this is a given, but I want to remind you, we don't just show up to the classroom, open our Bibles, and then close them and leave. You're investing into the lives of this church. When people hurt, you should hurt, right? It shouldn't be, oh, something happened. I hope one of the pastors finds out. Oh, something's going on. Please, somebody call a deacon. Yes and yes, but you're the church. And you're the ones that are opening the scriptures to them. So open your lives as well. You're always going to be a better teacher when you're investing in lives. Now I want to come back to this for just a moment. And I want to highlight something. Look and see how many times meditating and like language comes up. Now, given this is something I wrote, like 5-6 years ago. And it's still, I didn't have the foresight to put this together at the time, obviously. But I want you to think about how important it was then. And I want you to hear me now. The Lord grows us up, right? I hope I'm a better teacher and pastor than I was 5-6 years ago. I hope so. I hope that's the case. But I couldn't emphasize this enough now, what I was articulating then, meditating and dwelling in the scriptures. And I want to get back to that, but first I have 2 questions. And anybody can answer these. How do you eat a whale? Y'all are some weird folks. I've never eaten a whale. I wouldn't know. Yeah, so, but you're right. You eat a whale 1 bite at a time. Now, what are we communicating with that?
Slow, methodical,
It takes time. It's a gradual process. When I teach on discipleship overseas, do y'all remember Shel Silverstein, I think, or the guy with the sidewalk ends? It probably doesn't transfer over to other cultures as well as I would hope it would, but I like to show them the picture with the little girl, they said she couldn't eat the whale, and she says, I will eat it. And she starts off as a little girl, and she eats 1 bite at a time, and then she did eat it. And by the time she finished, she's an old lady, and there's a whale carcass there. But that's, yeah. But that's the nature of discipleship, isn't it? It's a slow, methodical, 1 bite at a time. But that's also the nature of what I want you to see. Your study in the scriptures is that you engage and learn and grow in the text 1 bite at a time. Now, what do you do when you take a bite of whale? Chew it. You chew on it for as long as necessary. nobody wants to have the story on, yeah, you know, so-and-so, they choked on their well bite. You have to chew and chew and chew. And I think about that when we're studying the scriptures. I think about the fact that we're called to chew. We've been given this ominous task. So we take it one bite at a time. And then we say, well, what do we do with that bite? We chew it. We chew it very slowly. When I was on patrol, I'm a notoriously slow eater. I don't know why. That probably doesn't surprise anybody that I do things slow. I just eat very slow. And I remember I would be on patrol and we'd be at lunch. So occasionally you'll see like 3 or 4 law enforcement vehicles like at Steve's or somewhere. Occasionally there's a reprieve and you can kind of get together with your friends for just a moment. The radio's still going, you still got to respond. But because that radio's on and because you might have to respond and it's not somebody had a car wreck or somebody just got broke into, I'll get to it when I'm done eating. No, there's no choice in that. And so what do? You eat with urgency, right? And I remember I would eat with great urgency. And I'd look while I'm still eating. And everybody else is just... I'm like, how do they do that? I don't understand. But you know what? We need to guard ourselves from a measure of urgency so that we can chew. Because this is the scriptures. And we want to take time to chew and to chew and to chew. And if I could give you a gift for something as teachers... it would be time. And I know everybody would love more time, but especially teachers. Especially teachers, because again, Sunday comes, and Sunday comes, and Sunday comes. But there's no replacement for time. Now because there's no replacement for time, it has extraordinary value. And we have to guard and value it. Value it properly. So you're going to have to give time as teachers to that slow chewing. And how do you spend that chewing? Well, you meditate on the scriptures and you pray. You know, you don't want to get to Sunday and be like, yeah, I got 5 bites of well down this week. And they're like crammed in your cheeks or it's all spilled down your shirt because you didn't take the time to chew. You've got to chew. You've got to meditate on the scriptures. You've got to spend time in prayer. So what I'd like to do for y'all, I know it's silly, but to me it's, whatever. I have little timers for all of you. They're different times, and I'll let you use your discretion. There's no special, it doesn't mean you're more special if you have a longer timer. Just probably means you chew slow. But I want a tangible reminder to all of you to evaluate your time, to learn to discipline yourself. If you've put this on your desk or whatever, so this one's, that's only a minute. So this one's 10 minutes. Do you have the capacity to sit there for 10 minutes and just look and think and mentally wrestle with the text? Not write a bunch of stuff out, not read another commentator, but just chew on it and pray about it and think about it. Because if you're like a child, well, no, that sounded really rude. Children look at these things and they're like, oh, it's going to stop. And it's going to probably be a discipline that builds up over time. But that's a discipline I would encourage you to do. I can't give you time, but I can help you to press you to see its value and to govern yourself accordingly. Because I want to remind you to take one bite at a time and to chew as much as necessary. You don't come to good conclusions from the text because you've read 30 commentators. You come to good conclusions from the text because you've labored in it. And it may include good commentaries. Remembering you're chewing to draw as much as you can, not just to fill the stomach. It's so dissatisfying. How many of you cook or bake or otherwise? Buck, raise your hand. You smoke stuff. Okay.
You said bake. Well.
Now, if you saw somebody just, is that very satisfying? Or is it more satisfying to see them and like, this is good. Taking a bite at a time. This is the scriptures. You don't just fill stomachs. You absorb and you take it in. And I have no intentions to be mystical. I may be one of the least mystical people you'll ever meet. Maybe magical, but not mystical. But I can honestly say, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that some of my best and sharpest insights into the scriptures is when I've done this right here. Not when I've turned an hourglass over or whatnot, but when I've intentionally and very slowly just meditated on the text. When I've wrestled through it in my mind and prayed, Lord, I want to understand this. I want to think through it. And I'll read over it, but not just read it to read it. I'm reading it I want those words to soak in. I want to grasp hold of them. And it's amazing. It's not that because, oh, well, if you spend enough time with something, you get familiar with it. You can sit in that high chair all day and you're not going to become any more familiar with it. But if it was a living and active high chair that could engage you, yes, you get to know it really well. And what do we have that's our teacher? I'm the one with the bad voice, not y'all.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah, we have the Holy Spirit. What a shame when we shortcut that process with what I can do, what a commentator can do, and we fail to chew and to meditate. And again, this is where the clearest and best insights have come from. It's nothing mystical. And I know there's a danger to say, well, that's mystical. I'm persuaded that my best teacher is the Holy Spirit. And as I chew and as I wrestle through it and I pray through it, the Lord opens our eyes. And so when we finish today, I have more of them. I want the teachers to come and y'all can pick one. And I don't care how you do it. And if you have the 1 minute one, you have to flip it over more often. And that's okay. Maybe you like yellow. But what I would do, what you do is when I'm gone, you know, I talked to you about the library ladies have that picture of Rick under the thing. This isn't so that you're like, oh, David, you know. This is when I'm not here to remind you in these kind of contexts. I want you to think about that's a silly little piece or bunch of sand in a piece of glass. But it's there to press me to think about being slow and deliberate about the passing of time and meditation and prayer. If I've accomplished that, I'll be really, really quite pleased with where we're finishing this walk together. Because I want you to labor in meditation. I want you to labor in prayer as you engage the scriptures. So learn to chew slowly, and know that the Lord uses that process. Third objective, and this one's very, very short. Don't worry. It's ending quickly. So, third objective. Provide some updates and a view to what 2020 looks like for Sunday school. I have no idea. Fourth objective. I'm kidding. Mostly kidding. So, this is likely a surprise to most of you. I adjusted the teaching schedule again. You know, like a week after I posted it. I don't like doing that, but I came to Denise and I did get her opinion. So for what it's worth, I do consult people. I said, this primer is 23 pages. They're going to be very displeased if I say 1 week. I also thought about the fact that I would be really grieved if we rushed through it, because I couldn't have picked a better passage for my own tenure to wrap up on, because I've taught this overseas in a variety of capacities, using this material that we're going to be using the next 2 weeks, for us to better apprehend the Lord as our shepherd. We take that so casually for granted. I don't want you to miss that. I don't want our people to miss that. It's one of the most magnificent things that's articulated to us in the scriptures. And then what's one of the best catalysts to articulate that? Well, Psalm 23 is a really good one. Partly because everybody's very familiar with it, but reasonably so, because it's a precious text. And in that primer, as it were, I go into how the scriptures address the Lord as our shepherd, how the Lord addresses the leaders of Israel as shepherd, how the Lord addresses the pastor elder as shepherd, and what that means. And one of the things I particularly hope that you'll highlight is Ezekiel and John 10, John 21, in preparation for 1 Peter. So in Ezekiel, the Lord is severely rebuking the leadership of Israel. Why? Because they failed to shepherd his people. They failed to tend to the flock. They didn't feed the people. They were abusing them. They were not leading them well. And the Lord has some strong language. And then there's some of the most beautiful language there. It's not just, I'll find another shepherd. What does he say? Anybody know? You're right. I'll shepherd my people. You've failed to shepherd my people. I will be their shepherd. And then you fast forward the redemptive clock, and what do you have in John chapter 10? Jesus has his public ministry, and what is he articulating to his people? I'm the good shepherd. And he preciously unpacks that and explains what the good shepherd looks like. And then that good shepherd restores one of his closest, most precious apostles. Peter, I mentioned this in Sunday school, not too often, but occasionally. I get so frustrated in church context when people mock Peter. I think that's really foolish when we do that because, well, he was impulsive. You know what? He was the one that got out of the boat. He was the one that hard charged after Jesus. When you run that fast, occasionally you will trip and flip over sometimes. But he loved his Lord. And he was the one, yes, he betrayed his Lord. But when did he betray him? After he went to go whack somebody's head off because he was going to stand by him to the death. But he did betray his Lord. He did deny him. And then what happens? Ezekiel, you failed to shepherd my people. I'll shepherd my people. I'm the good shepherd. And then the good shepherd restores his dear friend. And what does he say? Yeah, he uses his shepherding language. Peter, feed my sheep. You love me? Then feed my sheep. Tend my sheep. And then what does he do in 1 Peter chapter 5? I exhort the elders among you to shepherd the flock of God among you. Where he didn't just think like, that's a great picture. He's drawing from so many things. So that's why for 2 weeks, I want you to develop that because I want our people to hear what Peter was unpacking in that concise moment. So I hope that'll be helpful to you. The primer, the December 8th, December 15th, 1 Peter 1 through 4 will be December 22nd, 29th, January 5th. And then I think at this pace, y'all are probably going to be in 1 Peter at least probably through February. I mean, I would guess, because January gets a little chopped up as well.
1 Peter 5, you mean?
1 Peter 5. You know what? If you have a typo tonight,
It'll be my wife.
I'm standing up.
I did not look at this.
They may not hear me, but you will. No, 1 Peter chapter 5. And it's tracking to be about, without the primer, it's tracking to be about 45, 50 pages. So I'm guessing February, March, somewhere in there. Following that, the plan from the elders that has been discussed is to use the Grace to You resource to go through 1 Corinthians. You can, if you look at all these Bible book resources they do, it breaks them up into 12 lessons. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're long, depending on the book, but they're pretty consistently 12. Depending on how the elders and the leadership chooses to do this, it'll be 12 weeks, maybe 24 weeks, depending on how they splice it, how much supplementing. Probably toward the 12 weeks is what I'm guessing. I don't know. But then after that, I have no idea. But what I would encourage you to do, which you've done so generously to me when I came and was taking things over, is I don't remember, I heard a lot of things about, people like, oh, what's he doing? Or I don't agree with how you're teaching this. But nobody failed to support the direction I chose. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And so whatever direction y'all go, support the leadership, champion that so that it's effective for all the people. And that's our place to do that, to support and champion whoever the Lord places over us. So it looks to be 1 Corinthians next. That should be a very, very precious, good study. Also, something I'm personally working on is a supplemental guidebook. This may or may not be used here. And I'm not saying it to usurp anybody. I want to be very, very careful. It's not my place to say, okay, y'all are going to use this. My place is going to be elsewhere, and that's not my place. What I'm telling you is I'm going to continue to generate discipleship resources. If they're useful, super. If not, no worries. But for Noah and Silas, I'm watching in sermons, and I'm thinking, I want to create a workbook kind of thing where Monday through Wednesday, the passage that get preached on or taught on, they're kind of being primed for it. Excuse me, Wednesday through Saturday, they're getting primed for it. Sunday, they hear it. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a responsive, how do I think about it? How do I work through it? Not just a line, but an interactive workbook. So it's complementing every week, proactive prep, proactive response, proactive prep, response. I may do something like that for 1 Corinthians if that would be of help to you as teachers. And that's one of those, it may be up to y'all to use individually. I'm not going to push that on the church, but I'll continue to make things available. If you're interested, so be it. That'd be helpful. Great. Also, I would sincerely, for 2020, I'm going to implore you to implement the class missionary program. I don't have a whole lot of regrets. This is one of my small regrets that I never got this off the ground like I should have. And I wanted to, and I think that it's a good thing. So my encouragement, my request is try to get this off the ground. I'd love for y'all's classes to have a missionary that you're praying for every week that knows you, you know them. Some of you may be doing that. I don't think it got carried on as to the degree that I had intended it to. That's on me, and feel bad for me and do it. Please, I'd be grateful. Now, the fourth and final thing, and this is really all I have for this, is the feedback. What would be helpful to y'all moving forward? I've been doing the weekly emails. I won't be doing the weekly emails anymore. That's David. That's not something I even did from the start. I've done so many weird different things for y'all over the years, and some of them have done really well, some of them have flopped. I don't know what's always helpful, so I try my best to cultivate that. So right now we're doing the weekly emails. We tried the monthly meetings. I wasn't always very successful in that. Actually, I very rarely was successful in that, and I apologize. We do teacher training every so often. I do some supplemental stuff for y'all. But what will be helpful for y'all moving forward? Because if we don't hear, then we don't know. And the elders, they might try something thinking this will be helpful. And you're like, well, that was nice. Isn't that cute? But it's not particularly helpful. What would be helpful to y'all? So would emails be helpful? Would monthly meetings with an elder be helpful? Would more training be helpful? What would be helpful as you continue to press on? And this is the part where I can't. This is y'all. Hourglasses are helpful.
Is this something they could think about and get back to you?
No, I want an answer now. I came prepared. No, but we do need to know because again, time's precious. Time's precious for people that walk with you and help you also. I don't want to ask somebody to generate something that isn't that nice they're generating something. But if it's helpful, we need to know. So in terms of finishing out 1 Peter, would it be helpful to receive some kind of supplemental feedback from the pastors? Going into 1 Corinthians, would it be helpful this book's really helpful, but it's only 3 pages on this passage. Can we get some more direction? Things like that. Make sure, communicate that back to me. I'll send an email out to y'all if you could respond to that or catch one of us in person. Because one thing that will not leave with me is your care. I've tried to care for you. I regard this and my Sunday school fellowship as 2 of the most precious groups to me. But your care is going to be continued. You have, 2 elders in here right now that are part of the Sunday school network. And so that will continue, but they need to know how to care for you. So please make sure we communicate that effectively. Now, just a final again, just wanted to express my thanks to you. You've been faithful. That's no small thing. And if people fail to articulate that to you, know that the Lord will reward. He does see. So continue to press on. Continue to pray for one another, love one another, labor in the scriptures, and chew. If I'm gone and forgotten, that's perfectly fine, unless that happens with Denise, and then that would be unfortunate. I want my family to remember me, but if you forget, that's okay. But I want you to remember that guy. He talked about chewing slowly, praying and meditating. That's an invaluable tool that I hope will stay with you. So labor in the text, love the text, not because you're academics, but because you love the Lord of the Scriptures. Well, again, thank you. Make sure, teachers, you get your hourglass. I know some of you have been eyeing certain ones. Don't worry. I have the exact same, 2 of them. Kevin, you could be praying for him. He obviously is not here because he's in Kenya right now teaching pastors. You can be praying for Ron. Talk about being on 2 extremes. He's got one grandchild fighting for a life and then one that's waiting to join life. Join the O2 breathers. So it's a radical spectrum, a lot of mixed emotions there. So as we close, Buck, if you could close us, and if you could specifically be praying for them as well.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for David. Thanks for the care he has put into us as Sunday school teachers, for the passion he has for discipleship. Lord, and we pray that we would continue to grow in our ability to grow in our desire to teach your word faithfully. Lord, sometimes to stop and chew and meditate is the hardest thing we have to do. And it just doesn't seem right, Father, but we ought to be able to be still. We ought to be able to know that you are God and learn from you. So I pray that you would help us all to be more faithful in that. Lord, and we pray for Kevin as he's out in Kenya teaching biblical counseling. Lord, I pray that you would give him wisdom. I pray that you would give the students ears to hear so that they might understand how they might become more faithful shepherds, understanding how to care for the sheep, not just in a preaching contest, but in counseling and leading them through the Scripture. Father, we pray for Ron. What a blessing he is to this church, to his Sunday school class, to me as a friend. And I just pray you would be with their family right now. Be with him and Tina as Holly's about to give birth, as Paisley's fighting for her life. Lord, I pray for Chris and Ron's daughter, Melissa. I pray that you would just be with them. I pray that all of these things would be for their sanctification, but ultimately for your glory. And I pray that they would see that even in times of suffering, when we trust in you, when we place ourselves under your care, when we completely depend on you, that is when you are most glorified. So would you do that in their lives? Would you give them the strength needed? Lord, we love you. We thank you and just pray for each one of these teachers here today that you would just continue to help us grow in our knowledge of you, that we might be conformed into the image of Christ. In his name we pray. Amen.
Excuse me. Two or three announcements. I can't think right now. Just want to highlight, Bobby is going to be taking Growing in Grace we don't know, maybe indefinitely, maybe a little while. We're trying to be mindful of the new pastor that comes on, and he may or may not take that role. We don't know. I don't want to presume either way, but Bobby is faithfully taking up that mantle for me, so I'm grateful for that. Bobby is not just like wandered in here, if you're wondering. He's faithfully going to be teaching week in and week out with y'all. John is one of them. I don't have any reservation if somebody's like, I need a sub, that I can be like, John's been laboring in the text, and I bet he understands it as well as anybody that's teaching week in and week out. And so I just want to make sure I recognize John, very faithful in that. He's really busy, though. Work, children, and deacons, we're keeping him very busy, but he faithfully serves among us. I want to make sure I recognize that. He also got y'all ice, by the way. It wasn't working, so if you enjoyed ice, you can thank John. And then any instructions as far as food, Denise? Any instructions with like food or whatever?
We were on task.
No.
Okay.
If y'all want to take something, you can.
Yeah, this is a small group. Nobody will say anything. Be shameless. Eat more. Take it. Whatever you want to do. So thank y'all for your time. And again, teachers, please come get your hourglass.